Once again, I want to welcome all of you to today's lecture. It is going to be a very practical section. We have been able to do a couple of things, and I want to just do a recapitulation of what we've done so far. We have been able to estimate a model, formulate a linear programming problem. This is known as the Formulating Limited problem. And for your information, I'm just going to recap your mind by writing the model that we formulated. If you can remember, the model was Zmax equal to, this means that we're maximizing the profit of Formulating Limited. Okay, the coefficient of Fanyogo, which was X1, and that was 40, added to the coefficient of Fanchoco, which was X2. We're maximizing this subject to the following constraints. Okay, the first constraint was a labor constraint, which says that you need to use 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of labor to produce Fanyogo, and then 2 units of labor to produce Fanchoco. And this is a usage given the available 40 hours of labor. We also saw that for gallon constraint, which is another resource constraint, milk constraint, you need 4 gallons of milk to produce Fanyogo, plus you need 3 gallons of milk to produce Fanchoco, given the available 120 gallons of milk. The non-negativity constraint indicated that the decision variables, that is the number of sachet of Fanyogo or Fanchoco to produce, should be not negative. And this is what we have. So I want your eye to look at this. We are going to do this whole formulation. We are going to, after we formulated from the word problem to this, we give this information to Excel. Excel will do the entire calculation. Excel will give us the results. And there are about 13 to 20 questions that we have to answer from the Excel. Once you're able to do that, congratulations. I'm doing this in a simple framework here. That's why you have X1 and X2. We don't have too many decision variables, so that when you have multiple decision variables, you know how to handle it. All right. So what I want you to do is to open your Excel just like the way I am opening the Excel now. If you can see my Excel opened, and the first thing you should do is also open that empty Excel. If you can see my Excel, type yes. I just need a few people to type yes, so that I'll use that as a way to indicate that you can see my Excel. All right, perfect. So we are good to fly. So go along with me. I do not expect all of you to be able to do what I'm doing, but if you are able to do what I'm doing, you're ahead of the class. So your Excel must be open. The first thing to do when you're doing the formulation is to type Formulating Limited in the first cell. Cell is A1. So you type it there just as I've typed it there. Okay, you type it there like that. If you have been able to do that, and I always need just 1 or 2 people to go along with me. If you have been able to do that, type the word or type the number 1. If you have been able to do that, type 1. Okay, I'll use that to indicate that some are following. In fact, this is sometimes things you do in an exam, so you want to be able to learn how to do this. After that, the next thing you want to do on the right of the Formulating Limited is to type the names of the decision variables. And what are they? Fanyogo, but I want to just call it Yogo. And the other one should go to C1, Fanchoco, and I just want to call it Choco. It's nice to keep using small letters. It's better that way. And then on the right, which is the last one there, which is D, cell D1, you type the letter Z. That Z will represent the objective function, and we'll come and talk about it pretty soon. If you have been able to do all those three things I've just done in cell B1, C1, D1, if you have been able to do that, just type number 2. If you have been able to do that, just type number 2. I want to take a record of this for a reason. Okay. So type number 2 if you've been able to do it. Oh, fantastic. Some of you are with me. The next thing you want to do is come under the Farm Organa Limited. And this is the format you will always do. If there were more decision variables, I would have moved the D to the E and added maybe finite. Okay, and write it like that. Below the name of the company or the organization, you will write the number DV. DV. DV stands for what? It stands for the decision variables. So the items I'm going to write on the right of the DV, the items I'm about to write on the right of the DV, that is B in cell B2, in cell B3, and on and on and on. What I'm about to write are the decision variables. Okay. That's what I'm about to write, the decision variables. Okay. So right now, we don't know the values of the decision variables. Okay, we don't know them currently. And so what's going to happen is that in what we're about to do, we have to initialize their values to 0. Because when you're about writing, when you're about producing, you don't know the values of the amount you are producing. So under the Yogo, you type 0, the letter 0. Under the Choco, you type 0, the letter 0. Okay, to indicate that these decision variables are actually unknown. We don't know their values now. Okay. You don't do anything under the Z value. You don't do anything there yet. Now go under the decision variables. That is cell A3. Put your cursor at cell A3, which is below the Farm Organa Limited, which is below the DV, and then write coefficient. Okay. You can just write COEFF, coefficient. Now, this coefficient means that we have to write the per unit profit, the per unit cost, the per unit whatever, okay? And they will represent the coefficient. Now, your formulated model must be in front of you all the time. So whilst I am talking, okay, or you are talking, you must have the formulated model, just like here. You must have this model right in front of you because that's what you are actually formulating. Okay, that's what you're doing. That's what you are doing. So you got to be on your side. Got to be on your side. Okay, so now let's go back to our Excel. In fact, I could do this thing so quickly. I did it in a minute. I did it actually in 59 minutes. But I want to do this slowly so that you can follow. What was the coefficient of Yogo? So that you write it directly below the Yogo column. Who can type the answer there? What is the coefficient of Yogo? Which we have to type directly below the Yogo column. What's the coefficient? You see, what is interesting is that you get to be chatting with me whilst you are doing your work. You got to be toggling between your Excel, your chart, and all of that. Okay, so the coefficient, somebody just wrote 1. I'm not talking about 1. I said, what is it? So the coefficient is 40. So you type 40, and the coefficient of Choco is 50. So you type 50. Then you move the cursor to the next column under Z. And I'm talking about column cell D3. 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 Okay. So that will mean that there was a cell below the Z before this cell D3. That cell D3, that is where we will later, note it, we will later be writing our objective function formula. Remember, the objective function formula is 40x1 plus 50x2. We'll write it there. And so I just want to give it a bit of a highlight. I'm just highlighting it in yellow, just to indicate that we'll come back there. Okay. The next thing to do is to write constraints under the coefficient. Okay. So we are going to write constraint because the next thing to do is to know the constraints. Write a constraint. Okay. And in the constraint, you have to have something we call the left-hand side. The left-hand side of the constraint should be directly written below the Z, and this should be called the usage. The usage. So the left-hand side of the constraint, it should be in the column for D, which is the same column where the profit was. Okay. So that should be usage. Usage. You realize that I left 2 cells after the constraint before writing the usage. The next thing to write is the sign or symbol. Sign. These are all headings to guide you. Sign or symbols. Then on the right of the sign, the next thing to write is available. Do you remember the available is the right-hand side? So the usage is actually the left-hand side. The available is the right-hand side. And so all of these would have to be beautifully and methodically written. And like I said, they are just for beautification. They are just to beautify your Excel. For those that are doing modeling sharp, they don't really bother writing headings like this. Okay. Now that you're done, under the constraint in column 1, okay, under the constraint in cell A5, cell A5, okay, the first constraint was labor, so type labor there. And then below the labor, the second constraint was milk, so type milk there. And now the individual values that were supposed to be used for the labor and the milk corresponding to the yogo and the choco should be put there. And to understand what I mean at this stage, you go back to your formulation. That is why I told you that the formulation must always be in front of you. So these values, they are the ones that are the usage, and they are the ones you are going to write. Remember, the first number here is 1. The second number attached to the X2 is 2. The next number is 4 attached to the X1. And the other number is 3. So we are going to write 1, 2, 4, 3 in that section, okay, that we indicated for the usage. So when you go to the Excel, under the yogo corresponding to labor, and I'm talking about cell B5, you type 1. Cell B6, a C5, you type 2. Okay. Cell B6, you type 4. And then cell C6, you type 3. And remember, they must be directly following the yogo at the top, the choco at the top, in that same column, just as the formulation told you. Now, the usage must now be filled. The usage must now be filled. I'll come back to that. Okay, but we don't know the value here because remember that full usage was 1x1 plus 2x2. That was the usage. Okay. If you can remember, it was 1x1 plus 2x2. And that is the answer we are going to put here. But we don't know the answer yet. So I'm going to highlight it again, fill it with yellow. The same thing with the other one below it for the milk. Okay. So the combined milk usage, I don't know it. So you also fill that with yellow. Then the sign. The sign is just cosmetic. It's just to beautify everything. What is the sign? Well, the sign is less than or equal to. So on your Excel, just look for the less than symbol. Hold the shift key and click the less than before you write the equal to. Okay. And then copy and put it down the other sign. When you want to copy, look on the bottom right corner of that cell. The moment your cursor comes there, the cursor will change from white to black. The moment your cursor comes there, it will change from white to black. Just hold and drag it down, and then everything in the symbol here will be collected here as well without necessarily typing. I need to show you this because it's not all the time. Sometimes some of the constraints are 10. And if there are 10 constraints, you're going to type all the 10 in waste time. So you got to learn how to drag, copy, and drag through. The next thing is the available on the right-hand side. The available. Now, under the labor, the available labor was what? Labor hours was 40. So for the available, you type the number 40. And then for the milk, it was 120. So you type 120. There are a few things we need to do, and these are the important things we're about to do, and that's it. They are the ones that have been highlighted. The ones that have been highlighted, the first one is referred to the Z value. Please, let me show you in the formulation. Let me show you. So go back to the formulation. This value here, 40x1 plus 50x2, that is what we are going to put in there under the Z value in the highlighted yellow cell. So we go to the yellow cell, and what I'm doing here, this is where a lot of people get it wrong. And I beg you, focus, follow, detach yourself from mobile phone, anything. Pay more than the usual attention at this stage. You put the cursor in the D3, which is the highlighted section here, and just double click quickly. The cursor will be blinking and bring your equal to sign. Now, the reason why you are bringing the equal to sign is because it's a formula. It's a formula. What is a formula? 40x1 plus 50x2. But where is the 40? The 40 is here. The x1 is actually the 0, which we don't know the value yet. They are all in the Excel, so we can pick these things and then actually showcase. Now, what I'm about to write, if you don't focus, you will not even listen. You will not even hear what I said. If you don't focus, and even though I have said it, some of you would probably say that you didn't hear stuff. So focus and listen. The first thing to do is not to type the 40, but to collect the 40. So pick the 40. Remember, the cursor must be blinking after the equal to symbol. Click the 40, and the B3 will be collected in the cell. B3 will be collected. That is a 40. Remember, the 40 was multiplying the x1, and the x1 is the 0 above the 40. You can't go and collect the 0 above the 50. It's the 0 above the 40. But it is multiplying, so you need to bring multiplication sign. So go to your keyboard and look for shift key times, or depending on which one your keyboard is, just press shift key and then start times. Okay. And then you collect the 0 on top of the 40, because that is a value. You collect the 0 on top of the 40. The moment you do that, don't be click anywhere by heart, because that the moment you do that, the cursor must be blinking after the B2. Now, listen. What you do is that you hold the Fn and then press the F4 key. You hold the Fn and then you press the F4 key. I want to repeat that because some will get it wrong. Some will get it right too. You hold the Fn and then you press the F4 key. The moment you do that, a dollar symbol will appear in front of the B and in front of the number 2. A dollar symbol will appear in front of the B and in front of the number 2. Once you are done with that, you press the plus. So you hold the shift key and you press the plus, because remember this thing was being added. It's 40x1 plus. Okay. And after you've done the plus, this time you go and collect what? The 50. Okay. Now, the 50, if you don't take it, you will not know where it is. Okay. The 50. You don't know, because in my case here, the 50 is kind of being hidden. Okay, where it is supposed to be. So, but go up there, go up here in the formula bar at the top. You will see that the formula is there. Now the 50, watch carefully, the 50 is actually which cell? It is cell C3. So you can type it yourself, C3. All right, whether it's small letter or capital letter, doesn't matter. C3, that is cell C3. It is located here, just that the formula is hiding it. So once you do the C3, you bring your plus again. Sorry, your times. Remember, that 50 is multiplying the number above it. Okay. And what is that number? That number is C2. So you can do C2. Okay, C2. And the moment you do the C2, you press the FN F4 key. And the moment you do that, you see that the dollar will be in front of the C and in front of the 2. As you are looking at it, the way I'm looking at it, you should be able to do this. Once you are done with that, click enter. I'm come to, okay, I may have made a mistake, so let me just go back and quickly show. So when you make a mistake, just go back, look at it, and then you will know exactly what problem is existing there. And then you can correct it. Okay. So this is B3, okay? B3 times B2. So that was a, what do you call it? B3 times B2 plus C3 times C2. Okay, I think it's fine. Now, the reason why it's a percentage is because there's a percentage at the top here. It should be general. Okay. So that's it. Now, if you are done with this, type number 4 or number 4. Okay. If you're done, I told you that some of you get lost. Okay. But I want to know if you are done with it, you type number 4. That will tell me that some were following. Some were following. Perfect. The moment I have more than 10 people or 5 people, if yours doesn't have a percentage, no problem. Okay. Now, why did we put the dollar symbol? Let me just go there and show you again. I'm just going to double click to show you something. I won't click anywhere again. I'm just showing you. Why do we bring the dollar symbol when we're picking the decision variable? Why? Why do we have to bring the dollar symbol when we were writing the decision variable, when we were selecting the 00 in the decision? Who can tell me by raising the hand? Why did we have to do that? Why did we have to do that? Because your ability to tell me is an indication that you know why you are in this room. So let me ask Emmanuel Sakte to see. Yes, Emmanuel.
Yes, Doc. Okay, it's because we don't want Excel to pick any other cell aside what we are actually looking for. So basically, we are just locking the cell to get the actual answer with that particular cell number.
Yeah, but what is the motive for locking the cell? That's my question. So this locks that particular cell, but why would you do that normally? Let's somebody.
Okay, so we are doing that because that is yes, because that is the cell we are actually looking at, and also that is the figure in that cell we're actually working with. So we don't want Excel to, by mistakenly, use any other cell that will impact the final answer of whatever we are doing.
Okay. It's not the answer I'm looking for, but you've tried. Let me go to Edwina. Edwina, why? What is the motive? We are locking the cell for what purpose? That's my question. What purpose? What is driving that lock? Edwina.
Okay, I think it's because it's to ensure that we have an absolute value because of the 0.
Oh, no, not really. Not at all. Let me go to Joel. Joel, why are we locking this cell with a dollar symbol?
Okay, so because the cell B2 and C2 are the decision variables, that is the dependent variables. Those are the ones that all other answer is going to depend on. So we are locking the dependent variables so that when we are dragging to to get the answers of the other equations, it would pick directly from the decision variable, and then it will pick the rest of the answers from the labor and mill. I don't know if I'm clear.
I understand. Anybody who is smart enough will understand what you are saying. Now, the person who wouldn't understand is a person who is a beginner. Okay, but I understand you. So that's exactly, well, great answer. Dennis, I want to give him 2 marks for that nice explanation that is there. Okay, so
Yes,
we normally do this locking and bring the dollar symbol. If you can see, we didn't bring the dollar after selecting the 40 and the 50. We brought the dollar after selecting the 0 and the 0. Why? Because they are the X1 and the X2. And they are being multiplied in this case by the 40 and the 50. But they are not the only one. The 40 and the 50 are not the only numbers that are multiplying this X1 and X2. If you check the formulated model, you will see that this 1 is multiplying the X1 and the 2 is also multiplying the X1. This 4 is multiplying the X1, which is this 0, and the 3 is also multiplying the X1, which is this 0. And so since all of them are going to be multiplying the X1, I rather want to put that dollars in front of them to lock that 0, 0, so that when it comes to this section, which my good friend spoke about, when it comes to this section here, I don't have to type all of them again. I can copy, and that's what we are going to be doing. I can copy whatever 0 is here. Now watch it. When I highlight this, you will see that the 40 is multiplying the 0, the 50 is multiplying the 0. Okay. Now, I would have typed the same formula here because remember, this formula here is going to be, let me take you to the formulation. Okay, you see the formulation? You see the formulation? The formulation, that first formula is going to be this one there. It's 1x1, 2x2. So they are also going to multiply. And this other one too is also having x1 and x2. So instead of retyping all of this thing one by one, okay, what you can do is to commandeer Excel using this dollar symbol and tell Excel that if I copy what is in this Z, remember this thing is the Z formula. That's the Z formula. So if I copy anything, so please copy that, Control C to copy, okay? And I come and dump it here at the labor usage, and then drag it also to the milk usage. When you do that, they will all have 0, 0. But when you double click to see where they are picking the formula from, you will see that they are also multiplying the 0, 0 decision variables. What made it possible? It was because of the dollar symbol that was attached to those decision variables when you were formulating the formula. So these dollar symbols are very good because they help you. So at this stage, you know that when you double click to see the content, you will see that these numbers are actually multiplying the decision variables, just as the formula required. That is all. You are done formulating in Excel. Now we are going to do some few things and Excel will give us the answer. At this stage, I'm going to go forward to show you. But I just wanted to know that I'll take some few questions only after I'm done with the formulation. So let's go ahead and do the formulation. Now, how do we tell Excel to formulate this whole model and give us the answer? Now, what are you looking for? Well, the first thing you're looking for are the decision variables, these numbers, the 0, 0. I'm giving them a red color to indicate that we need those answers. We need them. Remember, one of the things about linear programming is to find the decision variables. Is to find, that is the first step. Determine the decision variable. That's it. And then your objective will be that once you've determined the decision variables, you can now use that to get your objective function value or your profit or loss. So anything that is 0 here, like, because once you find the zeros, you'll be able to find these other zeros, the values that are here. Why? Because they depend on the decision variables. When you go and click on them, you see that they are collecting some formula numbers from the decision variable. All right, so how do you start? Go to the tab at the top called the data tab. Click on the data tab. Click on the data tab. On the far right, you should see solver. On the far right, you should see solver. If you don't see solver, it means that your Excel has never used it before. Your Excel has never used it before. For those of you who don't see solver, type number 5 for me. If you don't see your solver on the far right, after clicking the data tab, if you still don't see your solver, type 5. Okay, so those of you who have typed 5, you are the ones who didn't do the assignment I told you to do. I told you to open your Excel and then watch the video and then use that video to invoke solver. You didn't do that. So you can follow me. I'll move a bit faster, to show you how to get your solver. So you see, my solver is here, but it wasn't here before. If it's not there originally, what do? You click on the File tab on the top left, File. Click on File. When you click on File, your pop-up will show as what you see here. It will show you the good morning and all of the things that you need. Now scroll down on the far left pane, on the far left green pane, scroll down to Options and click on Options. Click on Options. When you click on Option, the Excel Option Parameter dialog box will open. And that is what you see on the screen. The Excel Parameter dialog box will open. Now, on the far left pane of that box, look for add-ins. Look for add-ins. Look for add-ins and click on add-ins. Something will show, okay? The add-ins pop will show on the right. In that add-ins on the right, you will see active application add-ins and then inactive application add-ins. Your solver will probably be in the inactive. Your solver will probably be in the inactive. Look for it down there. Okay. So look for solver in the list and click it. Just as I've clicked mine. Click it. It will turn like, it will highlight blue. Click it. After that, come down to manage and you see go. Come to the manage down there and you see go. Click go. Click go. When you click go, the add-in parameter dialog box will open. The add-ins parameter dialog box will open. You will see solver in the list. You will see analysis 2-pack, UBA, euro currency, and other things. But what you are looking for is solver. You see that there's a box on the left of the solver. The solver is not ticked in your case, so tick it. Mine is already ticked. If it wasn't, it would have been empty like this. Then you would tick it. Once you tick it, click OK, and you're done. Everything will vanish. And now, when you go to your data tab, you will see solver now popping. Now, those of you, the 7 of you who raised your hands, that it didn't work, you didn't know, you didn't see it. I want to see out of that number, those of you who now got it after going through this process, type 6. Type letter 6. Those who went through this process with me now had it. Type 6. Perfect. Okay, good. Almost all of you. Okay. So that is fine. Now you have your solver. At this stage, click solver. All of you. Now everybody click solver. Click solver. When you click solver, a pop-up will show, and that pop-up is known as the solver parameter dialog box. Solver parameter dialog box. There are beautiful things in this solver, and you want to know them quickly. The first one is objective function. The objective function, that is the first place you see the cursor is blinking there. Please, whatever is there, click it and delete everything. So delete. You see so many things written, just delete, 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 so that the place is empty. That is where you are about to put your objective function. Now, where is the objective function? The objective function formula is the one down 2 steps below the Z. And now this offset objective is blinking empty. The cursor must be blinking empty. Okay, so it is requiring you to put in that formula there. So what is the formula? The formula is just selecting that cell. So click on that cell And the moment you click on that cell, you will see the $D3 will show. The cell D3 will show there. If you have the cell D3 there, or the proper cell referring to the Z formula that you are sorted. Guys, if you don't do this thing well, you will see that by the time we get the answer, your answer will not show. So I beg you to follow me. The next thing is to determine whether you are maximizing or minimizing. There are several things there. You can maximize, you can minimize. You see that the automated one, the default is maximize. So you leave it as maximize. If yours is minimized, go and click maximize. And you know some of the mistakes sometimes some of you will do. Sometimes somebody wants to play with it. So the person will go and click minimize, maximize, minimize, maximize. Then he forgets and he will leave it at minimize. I implore you, stay where your lane is. Okay, once you are done with that, go to the next one, which is by changing variable cells. By changing variable cells is the name Excel gives to the decision variables. You see, the decision variables as it stands now is 0, 0, and it will change. And so Excel calls it by changing variable cells. Click there and you see that the cursor is blank. Everything is blank there. Whilst everything is blank, go and click the 0 for the yogo and drag it to the 0 for the choco. I repeat, click the 0 for the yogo, drag it to the 0 for the choco. And it must appear in that by changing variable cells, you must see B2 column C2. That means that you have selected them nicely. Don't go and click the 0 for the yogo and go and click the 0 for the choco. No, click for one, drag it to the other, you get it. Okay, once you are done, click the big white space below, which is called subject to the constraint. Subject to the constraint. Now, the subject to the constraint is the deepest part of your formulation. Now, you see that the moment you click the subject to the constraint, there's a bit of an hourglass, there's a bit of a zigzag, diamond, horizontal, rectangular symbol in a space. Once that is showing, it is requiring you to enter your constraint. So to enter the constraint, you click add on the right. You click add on the right. The moment you do that, the constraint parameter dialog box will pop up. The constraint parameter dialog box. Now the constraint has two sides, the left side, the sign, and then the right side. Our left-hand side is called usage. Excel calls that cell reference. Our right-hand side is available. Excel calls that constraint. And then the symbol is there. Now, our symbol in this very example, the symbols are all the same. But please know that life is not a straight line. You will notice that later that the symbols are not always the same. Sometimes some of them will be less than, some of them will be equal to, some of them will be less or equal to, some of them will be greater or equal to, so many mix. So in that case, you have to do it one by one. And in doing it one by one, you click this arrow and then indicate for each constraint when you're doing it. But in this, our example, because everything is the same, we don't need to do it one by one. Just go, make sure the cursor is blinking at the cell reference, the left-hand side, cell reference. And click the first 0 for the usage and drag it to the second 0 down. And once you release your hand, you should see D5 column D6. And then you select the symbol. Now the symbol is already selected, so you don't need to select. But I just want you to click that little arrow to see that several others are there. We shall use all of them except the last one for this course. We shall do the integer linear programming, which is the one you see the integer, the binary integer programming. You see that we shall also use that. Please don't be clicking by heart, okay? So that you forget that it is actually the less than or equal to, which is what you need. Once you see the less than or equal to, click on the right-hand side and ensure that it is the less or equal to that is showing as the sign. The right-hand side is a constraint. That right-hand side corresponds to your available. Look at your available. You have 40 and then the 120. While the cursor is blinking at the constraint, go and highlight the 40, drag it to the 120. Pow! All of them are done. If there were more constraints, you would have clicked add, and then you will add those constraints that don't have what? Less than, or constraints that have integer formulation. But because there is none, no more constraint to add, you click OK. And once you click OK, those constraints are now beautifully regrouped in the big white space under constraint. Just one more and we are done. You may be wondering, what about the non-negativity constraint? We didn't write that. Well, Excel has that there automatically. So you see the tick, make unconstrained variables non-negative. So the non-negativity constraint is there. Make unconstrained. So you have to take it. You have to take it. Just a second. You have to take it. All right. Okay, so I'm sure most of you have followed. So you would take the unconstrained variables non-negative. Take it if it's not ticked. Then you come down, select a solving method. Please click it and you see that the method we are using is the simplex method. The simplest algorithm, which I mentioned it in the beginning of this course, is the one that was engineered by George Danzig in 1947. And this simplex linear programming algorithm is what we are using. So select the simplest algorithm and you are done. You are done. Now, please listen, please listen, please listen. At this stage, you are about to click solve at the bottom. Once you click solve, it must find a solution. If you don't get a solution, you are in trouble, my dear. If you get a solution, you will have a beautiful lunch, okay? So we're about to click solve. And when it's found a solution, Excel will tell you. So click solve and boom, Excel finds a solution. Now, normally Excel is supposed to show you something. I don't know why it didn't show. So let's see. There you go. This pop-up must come. And it's an important pop-up. It says solver found the solution or constraints and optimality conditions are satisfied. So at this stage, you have found a solution. And it gives you 4 options. So what are the options? Keep solver solution, restore original values, blah, 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 blah. And then you have something, a report. There are 3 reports. Answer, sensitivity, limit. The report you are going to select is the sensitivity report. So you click the sensitivity report. Oh, by the way, when you look into the Excel, when you move the solver parameter results out and you look into the Excel, you can see clearly that the answers are showing behind the scenes. Okay, the yoga, which was 0, is now found the answer. The choco, which was 0, is found the answer, and all of that. But we are more interested in the sensitivity report. So click on the sensitivity report. And once you click on the sensitivity report, you click OK. But you see, keep solver solution. Okay, don't take that one. Select restore original values. So I don't want the original value. I don't want the solution to appear. I want the original values. But the most important thing is the report. Okay, sensitivity report. Click that and click OK. A new Excel sheet will be created. Look at the sheet. One of the sheets you will see is a sensitivity report. If you see the sensitivity report, click on it and type number 7 to tell me that you have seen the sensitivity report. Type number 7. For those of you who can see the sensitivity report after going through that, type 7 and confirm you have the sensitivity report. You are the creme de la cremes for this. Fantastic. Fantastic. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Oh, I'm having over 30 people getting your answers. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, the process you just went through It's a process I will give it to you to learn. You got to go through that process. And we shall be doing more of this so that you will master that process. But for the purposes of practicality and exams, I will give you the sensitivity report every time, and I will ask you 13 to 20 questions. So that means that this sensitivity report is not a joke. The only thing you will have in an exam after the preamble is a sensitivity report. And your job is to answer the questions related to this sensitivity report. So we are going to make sense of the sensitivity report. But at this stage, any question, you have generated the sensitivity report. You have generated it. It's looking beautiful. It's looking nice. It's looking fantastic. And now the next thing to do is going ahead to make sense of the sensitivity report, which is the results that you have. You want to make sense of that. So the question is, how do you make sense of the sensitivity report? Well, the only way you can make some sense of it is for me to ask you some questions. So here is my first question. And I want to show you the question so that at least you have an idea. The first question is this. From the sensitivity report, what is the optimal solution to this problem? Watch the words. What is the optimal solution to this problem, to this Farm Ghana Limited problem? From the sensitivity report. From what report? From the so it means that just using the sensitivity report, what is the optimal solution to this problem? Who can tell me by raising their hand? Or what can guide you to know the answer to that question? What guides you to know the answer without picking the answer from anywhere, from any book, from any video, using your own mind? What is in this sensitivity report that tells you that, oh, this is the optimal solution? What is there? Who can tell me? Oh, by the way, what do we mean by the optimal? Let me go to Chachu. Chachu, tell us. What is the optimal solution to the Farm Ghana Limited problem? Chachu, I don't know. I'm not able to get to. Let me go to. Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, so the optimal solution would be producing 24 fan yogo and 8 choco. But the final value can tell us what the optimal solution is.
Relax. Relax, you can be wrong. You can be wrong. Don't tell me the answer. Don't tell me the answer. Oh. How did you get it? Is that what? What helps you to know the optimal solution to the problem? What helps you to know the yeah, go ahead.
I think the final value can help you to know what the optimal solution is.
Okay. So let me tell you why you are wrong. Okay, let me tell you why you are wrong. When you say that the final value will help you know the optimal solution, that is wrong. Because there are two final values. One is the final value of the variable cell. Two is the final value of the constraint. And I now know that in your head, you are now probably saying, oh yeah, I mean the final value of the variable cell. But you see, when you are teaching, you got to know what final value, because when you are telling a tile that answer, the tile sees the final value. So you say the final value. So he goes, he says, oh, the optimal solution is 40 and then 120. Because he said final value. And so it is the final value of the variable cells. That is what gives you the optimal solution. So guys, I want you to know that that question, examiner could say that How many Fan Yogo and Fan Choco should Farmer Ghana Limited produce in order to maximize the profit? It's the same answer. You pick it from the final value of the variable cell. To be honest, it's the easiest question you can ever ask. But you need that easiest question because you need that to guide you to find the next thing. So you now indicate that this is the final value and that the final value is to produce 24 sachets of Fan Yogo and 8 sachets of Fan Choco. Okay, guys, I need you to tell me the next question. What is the corresponding value of the objective function? Just using the sensitivity report, what is the corresponding value of the objective function? Now, the word corresponding value means that he's expecting you to use this together with, to get something, which is the objective function. So how will you have worked that? What is the corresponding value of the objective function? Still using the sensitivity report. Who can tell me? What is the corresponding value of the objective function? Remember, your ability to be able to tell me how you work this is more important than how you work it. Okay. All right, let me go to Emmanuel.
Yeah, all right, so Doc, okay, so the value is 1,360, and this is how I got it. So I multiplied the objective coefficient, that is the 40 times the final value, that is the 24, plus the 50 times 8. So, I had the 1,360.
So what it means is that in order to always get the value of the objective function value, in order to get the total profit or the total cost or the total loss or the total revenue or whatever objective function value is there, in order to get it, always multiply the final value by the objective coefficient plus the next final value times objective coefficient plus the next final value times objective coefficient. Use that, and then you will get the final, the objective function value. All right. So you got to be able to learn how to answer these two main questions. Okay. Now let's go to the next question. In your sensitivity report, you will see something known as the reduced cost value. The reduced cost value. What is that? Let me go back and show you. There's a column called the reduced cost value. What is that reduced cost value? Guys, your understanding of the reduced cost value is very important because the way you understand it is important. Now, the first thing you want to notice is this. Each decision variable has a final value and has a reduced cost value. And you can see in our own that the reduced cost value is 0. But note that it can be positive or negative as well. Note that it can be positive or negative. In our case here is 0. What is that reduced cost value? Well, first, before, let me just tell you when it can be positive and when it can be negative. Okay, so it is negative when you are in the maximization, and then positive. What do you have? Somebody is asking a question. Let me just go back. Michael, ask a question. Michael, let me make you a co-host and then you can quickly ask a question. So click on.
No,
yes.
I was trying to answer the question you asked.
Okay, answer it.
To me, I think it's the slugs.
Okay. Okay, we'll come back to that. But it's not slugs. It's not slugs. The reduced cost value. Now, every time you have a reduced cost, the value can be positive or negative, regarding whether it is a minimization or maximization, respectively, or it can be zero. It is when it is zero that it is useful. Why? Because, and here's what you got to put down. The reduced cost value is the opportunity cost of producing a particular product. Full stop. The reduced cost. It is the opportunity cost of producing a particular value. Guys, let me just share something with you. Right now, you are looking at me, listening to me, you are in a class with me. You could be using that time for a wedding, for a funeral, for a holiday, for a trip. The opportunity cost of sitting here right now with me is that next best alternative that you have forgone. So in principle, what you are telling me right now is that what you are doing with me, it is important. It is more important and probably most important to you. That word I use, more important and most important, they are important words. If it is most important for you, then it means that what you are saying is that whatever else you are losing, whatever opportunity cost, whatever alternative is not that key. But when that alternative is zero, what you are actually saying is that when the opportunity cost of sitting right here with me is zero, what you are saying is that you sitting right here in front of me is most important than anything else. And that is why you are giving it a value of zero. So why does the reduced cost is the opportunity cost of producing a particular product. Now you can see that the reduced cost value for Fan Yogo is zero. What does that mean? It means that the opportunity cost of producing Fan Yogo is zero. It means that if I were to produce Fan Yogo, 24 sachet of Fan Yogo, I am not incurring any cost, any opportunity costs. In other words, the next best thing I could have used my money for resources for, I have diverted those resources into the production of Fan Yogo, and yet I'm losing nothing. So I don't care producing the 24 units of Fan Yogo because I'm not incurring any damage, any opportunity cost of doing that. It's zero. I lose nothing. So I can go ahead and produce my Fan Yogo. In other words, the production of Fan Yogo is useful to me now than anything else because I'm not incurring any opportunity cost. So I should go ahead and do it. But if the opportunity cost value had been, say, -10 or something, which we shall look at next time, if it has been like that, what it means is that I am now going to sacrifice. If I should force, you see, the opportunity, the reduced cost value is going to tell you that you should not produce. So the moment the reduced cost value becomes, absolute value positive, the moment it becomes positive, what it means, but of course, in a maximization, remember the value is negative, okay, but I'm saying absolute value. Okay, so let's say that it becomes -10. What it means is that the value of Fan Yogo at that point in time will be zero. Okay, which means you shouldn't produce Fan Yogo. Why? Because if you produce Fan Yogo, that's why it's zero. Zero means you shouldn't produce it. Because if you produce it, you will incur an opportunity cost of 10. And therefore, you should not. So anytime the reduced cost value is there, the final value of the decision variable is not there. And when the other one is there, when you are producing, then the reduced cost value should give you a negative value. Or it should show itself as it being there, positive or negative, as it being there. So in this sense, the reduced cost value helps you to know whether or not you should produce the opportunity, the final value. It helps you to know. It tells you whether you should produce it or you should not produce it. So what was the value of that? So now we can see that the final value of the find your goal is 0, which means that the final value of find your goal is 24, but the reduced cost value is 0, okay, which is telling you how much the objective function value is going to change if you should force to produce that find your goal. So suppose that the value of find your goal was 0. Suppose that value of find your goal was 0. It means that you shouldn't produce it. Suppose this 24 was 0. It means you shouldn't produce it. And at that time, it's telling you 0. It would have given you a negative value of the reduced cost. Okay, which means that if you should force yourself to produce that find your goal, even though it's telling you not to produce because it's 0, okay, what is going to happen is that you are going to incur a negative returns on the production. So that is the importance of the reduced cost, and that is what it is. Now, there's something else you should note about this. Okay, so let me ask you this question and see, even though I've said it multiple times, okay, who can tell me this? Why does the reduced cost value column contain 0? Who can tell me? Why does the reduced cost value contain 0? As it stands here, why does it contain 0? Okay, you got some strong men and women who have raised their hand. Let me go to Nana. Nana, can you tell us why the reduced cost column contains 0?
Yes, sir. The reduced cost will contain 0 because that's the optimal solution. Because that's given us the optimal solution for the objective function, and it means that if we should produce 24 sachets of the find your goal and then 8 sachets of find your goal, we're going to maximize the profits that we are going to have. And it means there's no opportunity cost to
Exactly. That's
the
a key
solutions
point.
that we have.
That's a key point. There is no opportunity, there is no kind of loss, okay, that you incur for producing the find your goal or the find your goal. That is the key thing. Fantastic. Now, let me go to the next question. Okay, and then you can answer. Let me switch to the next verse, and you can tell me that. Which constraints are binding? Which constraint? And I'm telling you, these are all exam questions. It's sometimes the answer, it's exam questions which contains about 30 marks. So you got to really pay attention. Exam questions. Which constraints are binding? First, let me show you the constraints. Which constraints are binding? Keep it in mind, which constraints? So when you go to the sensitivity report, there are 2 constraints here, the labor usage constraint, the milk usage constraint. These constraints, you see them in the constraint section. The question is, which of these constraints are binding? And probably you're also asking, what do we mean by a binding constraint? Guys, there are 3 reasons to indicate a constraint that is binding. Number 1, put it down. A constraint is said to be binding when the left-hand side of the constraint equals the right-hand side of the constraint. Now, in here, the left-hand side of the constraint is the one I'm highlighting. Sorry, the left-hand side of the constraint is the final value of the constraint. The left-hand side of the constraint is the final value of the constraint. The right-hand side of the constraint is the RH side of the constraint. So the left-hand side of the constraint and the right-hand side of the constraint, these are what you see here. Excel calls the left-hand side of the constraint the final value as well. When is a constraint binding? It is when the left-hand side of the constraint is the same as the right-hand side of the constraint. That's number 1. That means that the usage is the same as available. That means that all the resources have been fully utilized. That means that there are no slacks, because if all the resources are fully utilized, it means there are no slacks, there are no wastages, there are no inefficiencies. And later on, you will learn that there are no reduced cost values. So I've given you all. Who can tell me, when is a constraint set to be binding? Okay. Well, let me ask you this question rather. Which constraints here are binding? Which of the constraints are binding? Which of the constraints? Asa.
Both labor and milk are binding using the final values that we found.
So what is the value of the slack for milk, Asa?
The value for the slack for milk would be 0.
Excellent, excellent. So that shows that the constraints are truly binding. So guys, understand what a binding constraint is. You really need to understand what a binding constraint means, and then how to identify. In fact, sometimes some of the questions I ask you, identify all the non-binding constraints. That's some of the questions I ask you. Identify all the non-binding constraints. The next thing we want to discuss is the shadow price. The shadow price. The shadow price. So check your Excel, look at the sensitivity report, and then in the sensitivity report, you will see something known as the shadow price. The shadow price. What is that? What is this shadow price? Well, you can see that this shadow price is in the constraint section. That's where it is, the constraint area. What is that shadow price? Guys, this is a very simple thing. And at this stage, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to open the whiteboard and show you something. And I want to put this down. The shadow price tells you by how much, okay? That's the shadow price. The shadow price tells you by how much the right-hand side of the constraint, by how much the right-hand side of the constraint changes if it tells you by how much the right-hand side of the constraint changes sorry, let me just change it. It tells you how much the objective function value changes. The same thing I'm going to say though. It tells you how much the objective function value changes when the right-hand side of the constraint changes. When the right-hand side of the constraint changes, by how much the objective function value will change. In other words, it is also called the dual value, by the way. Okay? It's sometimes called the dual value, the dual. Let me just take you back to the sensitivity report. The dual. Now, what is the right-hand side of the constraint? This one, 40 and 120. Okay. When the right-hand side of the constraint changes by 1 unit, how much is that going to affect the objective function value? Now, at this stage, right now, you should know the objective function value. Okay, Davina says I should repeat. I'm saying that the shadow price tells you how much profit changes. And I'm using the word profit because we are dealing with profit. Other than that, that thing becomes objective function value, the Z value. So it tells you by how much the objective function value changes when the right-hand side of the constraint changes. Let me explain, you will get it. It's easy, it's simple. Now, the right-hand side of the constraint is usually the resources. Of course, sometimes they are mixed constraints. The resources, one of them is labor here. One of them is milk. These are resources. Their only available resources are 40 and 120 for labor and milk respectively. 40. You can't get more than that, but you can. You can't get more than that, but you can. There is always an overdose, an allowance, an overtime. So what this question is saying that if you increase the hours of labor, which is 40 by a certain unit, let's say by 1 hour, so that now the hours have moved from 40 to 41. How is that going to affect the profit? The Z value. How is it going to affect the Z value? The shadow price will tell you how that will affect the Z value. How? Well, if you should increase this right-hand side, which is 40 by 1, which means it goes to 41, what the shadow price here being 16 means that profit will increase by 16 times the one that you increase by. So it means that profit will increase by $16 or 16 cents. The same way, if the gallons of milk increases from 120 to 122. I've changed it. 120 to 122. How much profit do you think will increase? You can tell me. How much profit do you think will increase? How much? Guys, follow me. Don't be sleeping. Follow me. Follow me. Okay. Some of you are yeah, Nana.
It'll be 12.
Well, how did you get a 12?
So it is increasing by 2 units. That is 2. So that will be 6, which is the shadow price for the milk usage times the 2, which will give you 12.
Perfect. Excellent. Well done. So you use the shadow price to tell you by how much the profit changes or the Z value changes when the right-hand side of the constraint changes. The word change means rise or fall. So note the direction before you act. That is a shadow price. That is a shadow price. Now, let's go to some deeper shadow price questions. Because if you can understand this principle of shadow price, then you should be able to understand some other interesting things. Okay, so let's take some things, but I need to make some point clear. The shadow price, even though you increase the right-hand side of the constraint, there is also a limit to which you can increase the right-hand side of the constraint. I just wanted to know that. Because the fact that you can move it from 40 to 41, the fact that you can increase it by 1 unit, it doesn't mean that you can increase it by 2 million units. There is a limit. There is a band, which is known as the sensitivity bound, the sensitivity range. We'll come back to that, which tells you by how much you can be changing the right-hand side forward or backward. There is a sensitivity change, but we'll talk about that later. So let me ask you some questions related to the shadow price. By now, note something that when we are dealing with the shadow price, okay, the shadow price can be positive, as you see in our case. If it is positive, it means that a unit increases in the right-hand side of the constraint will increase the objective function value if it is positive. If the shadow price is negative, it means that if you should increase the right-hand side, then the objective function value will go down. And if the shadow price is 0, please note that, it means that the constraints are binding. Remember, I said it earlier, that when the constraints are binding, there are 4 things that become relevant for you to know that constraints are binding. 1, The right-hand side and the left-hand side are the same. 2, the usage and available are the same. There are no slacks. There are no wastages. There are no inefficiencies. And there's a zero shadow price. There's a zero shadow price. So I've asked this question multiple times before, that what will indicate that this thing is, the constraint is not binding? It means that the shadow price is not zero. That's when you know. So anytime the shadow price is not zero, you should know that that constraint is not binding. Sorry, it's not zero. It means that the constraint is binding. But if it is zero, the constraint is not binding. Okay. Let me give you some questions related to this shadow price. Look at the first question. Here is the management of Farm Ghana Limited, and they have a problem. The problem is that they want to get extra resources. Using the story of the shadow price, which of the resources will be of most value to them and why? Now look at the answer and raise your hand and tell me. Management want to increase one of the resources, labor or milk. Which one of them will be of most value to them and why? Which one will be of most, which of the resources you are looking at with your naked eye will be of most value to them and why? Which one? Which resource will do that magic? Bismarck.
Please, the labor constraint. This is because
the word constraint. I say which resource?
Okay, the labor resource.
Why?
Because it gives the highest shadow price per each unit rising the labor.
Very good, very good. So given the fact that labor has a higher shadow price than milk, it makes sense to raise labor, to choose labor, because what that means is that it's going to increase more profits. It's going to increase the Z value in this case. So it's better to handle that than to put your attention. In fact, even if you should increase the gallons of milk by 2 gallons, by 2, it will not even reach increasing the hours of labor by 1 hour. Have you observed? It will not match it. Because if you increase the labor hours by 1, profit will rise by 16. But if you increase the gallons of milk by 2, profit will rise by only 12. So the gallons of milk doesn't carry much weight compared to that of the labor. Next question, still on this sensitivity. Now, and I've made this point clear here that even though we are increasing, you said that labor hours, it doesn't mean that because of that you are going to be increasing hours of labor by heart. No, what it simply means is that you can increase the hours of labor, but there's a limit to which you can do that. There's a limit. Okay, now answer me this. And now you have to take your calculator and you have to make sense of this. What if management could increase profits by either increasing labor hours by 20, or they increase gallons of milk by 40? Which should they choose? Increasing the labor hours by 20 or the gallons of milk by whooping 40? Which should they go? Should they increase the labor hours by 20 or the gallons of milk by 40? Which should they go for? And why are you answering that way? Which should they go for? And why are you answering that way? You know what a person can be doing here? A person will be sitting down in this room, and even though the person couldn't follow us through the Excel, the person, because of that, is also not following us through the answering of these questions. The person is there. The person is sitting down there. He's not listening. He is not focused. He's not raising the hand. He's not answering something. He's not going with us. The person is not there. And on that time, the person realized that, no, I should have been taking part. All right. Let me ask Felix.
Yes,
Can you tell us?
Yes, sir. So by increasing 20 hours, he's going to get 320 cedis. And if he increases gallons of milk, he's going to get 240. So he'd rather choose to increase the labor hours than increase the gallons of milk.
Good. What is interesting about this question? You can try and tell me what is interesting about this. Or go ahead and tell me what is interesting about it. What is so interesting about this very question that you answered? Felix, still on you.
Please, I'm lost, sir.
You're lost, you're lost. Michael, what is so interesting about the question? Why you think the question was even asked in the first place?
If you don't take time from the question asked, if you don't take time, you think that the 20 will give lower profit.
Yeah.
But rather 40 will give higher profit. But upon calculation, you realize that the 20 is the one giving the highest profit.
I'm giving you 2 marks for that sensible answer. Okay, that is it. Because hours is being increased by just 20. Labor is being increased by 20. Milk is being increased by 40. If you don't take the shadow price into consideration, you think that about 40 is bigger than 20. The shadow price determines what is bigger. Okay, and so that is why it is important to always let the shadow price guide your thinking in the process. Very good. So I could ask several related questions on the shadow price. I could, and I want you to take note and understand each one of this. At this stage, we are going to go to something known as the sensitivity range. The sensitivity range. Unless there's a question at this point, raise your hand and let me know and I'll explain. Otherwise, I'm going to go, if you check carefully, we've been able to explain all of the items on the thing. We've explained the 2 final values for the variable cell and for the constraint. We've explained the reduced cost and also the shadow price. We have explained the objective coefficient and then the right-hand side of the constraint. What is left is the allowable increase and the allowable decrease. And that is the sensitivity range topic. Before we go to that, any questions so far on anything? Any question? Emmanuel. Okay, let me go to Emmanuel. Emmanuel will have a question. Emmanuel, ask a question and let's see.
Yes, Prof. Okay, I think I got confused with the signs to know if a constraint is binding or not. And you made mention that if the shadow price is 0, it's not binding. But because at some points, I think there were some confusion there. So I just want you to clarify that. So does it mean that if the shadow price is 0, it means that the constraint is not binding?
Constraint is binding. The constraint is rather binding if the shadow price is not 0.
Okay.
If the shadow price is not 0, the constraint is binding. But what I said is that if the slacks are 0, the constraint is binding. If the slacks are 0, it means that the left-hand side and the right-hand side are the same, and so the constraint is binding.
Okay.
But the shadow price, as long as the shadow price has a value, a non-zero value, the constraint is not binding. The constraint is not binding. So anytime you see a value that is a positive value in the shadow price, you should quickly tell you that, oh, this is a binding constraint. I hope you get it now.
Yes, please. Thank you
very
much.
Confusing. That's all it simply means. It's not what I said. It is the fact that it can be confusing. Because if you don't take it, you confuse the shadow price with the reduced cost with the slacks and all of that. So that is it. But it makes sense if the shadow price is positive. Okay, What it means is that we are producing, and so we are producing, and therefore we are making some profit. And once we are producing and we are making some profit, okay, then there is no need for for somebody to come and tell me there are a lot of inefficiencies in the system. And so if the cider price is truly there, then of course you should have a binding constraint. Next question. Okay, I'm sure you're all clear and I'm sure you're all fine. At this stage, ready, we are going to look at the last thing, and that is the sensitivity range. I'm taking you back to the Excel. And I want you to learn how to calculate the sensitivity range. That's the first thing. Learn how to calculate. Now, first of all, what is this sensitivity range? Well, guys, look at it carefully. When you look at the last two columns, there is something we call the allowable increase and the allowable decrease. The allowable increase. Now, each constraint has a final value in there, and each of the variable cells also has a final value. Now, the coefficient, the objective coefficient, the sensitivity range is related to the objective coefficient. I want to repeat that. The sensitivity range, that sensitivity range value, which is allowable increase and allowable decrease, it has to do with the objective coefficient. So when you see the 26 and the 15, the 26 is an increase, the 15 is a decrease. Okay. Now, when you have the decrease, what it means is that the decrease here in terms of the variable cells, the decrease here means that you should subtract it from the objective coefficient. The increase means that you should add it to the objective coefficient. And that is what it is for every other thing. Even when it comes to the constraint, the decrease here means that you should subtract it from the right-hand side of the constraint. And the increase means that you should add it to the right-hand side of the constraint. So how do you calculate the objective coefficient? How do you really write it? Because how you write it is very important. This is how you write it. Now, if you are actually writing the range, because remember, this is a range. If you are writing the range, in terms of I just want to use my, in terms of the objective coefficient, the sensitivity range is written as sensitivity range for that particular objective coefficient. And it is hovering between less than and another less than. You write the lower bound first. So this is the lower bound, and then you write the upper bound second. Okay. You write the lower bound first, and you write the upper bound second. Now, the lower bound is going to be the objective coefficient minus the allowable decrease. The lower bound is objective coefficient minus allowable decrease, whereas the upper bound is the objective coefficient plus the allowable increase. Take note. So, on the basis of that, I want you to calculate for me the sensitivity range for the coefficient of fine yogo. What is the sensitivity range for the coefficient of fine yogo? Think it through and tell me the sensitivity range for the coefficient of fine yogo. Now I'm showing you the Excel sheet. What is the sensitivity range for the coefficient of fine yogo? Tell me the lower bound first and then the upper bound. If you're ready, you raise your hand, you tell me. This one, when you tell me the straight answer, is fine because I know you did a calculation. Who can tell me the sensitivity range for that of the coefficient? So how much less, up to how much less can I reduce the 40, the price, the per unit, and up to how much more can I increase? Let me go to Justice Hollison. Justice, tell us your answer and let's see.
The lower is 25. And then the upper boundary is 66.66.
Good. What do this mean? What do this mean? And this is the most important thing here. For the objective coefficient here, what does this mean? What does this mean? If Justice, if you want to answer,
yes, please. What it means is that the minimum, that's the minimum profit, minimum coefficient to get the minimum profit. The lowest we can go will be 25 for fine you go. And then the highest to maximize would be 66.66.
Okay. So it means that that you have some flexibility as a manager to increase your price of fine you go and fine chocolate. And the lowest you should go. Now, when you say the lowest you should go, that will allow you to do what? So here is the point. As long as that unit price of 40 is hovering, as long as it's dancing anywhere between the 25 and 66.67, as long as that is happening, the optimal solution will not change. The optimal solution will not change. The Z value will change. The Z value will change. But as long as it's within the sensitivity range, the optimal solution, I want to prove that. Okay. So let's go to our Excel. Let's go to our Excel. If you look at the Excel carefully, remember the sheet that we used. This was a sheet. And we said that this value of 40, it should not go below what? Type me the answer. It should not go below what? Okay. It should not go below 25. And that if it goes below 25, what will happen? The optimal solution, what was the optimal solution? 24 here. And what was the optimal solution here? 8. The fine yogo of 24 and the fine choco of 8 will change. Will change. The moment it goes below 25 and gets to even 24, the value will change. So let's put it to 24. Okay. Let's change the value from 40 to 24. So that means it's gone outside the sensitivity range. Let me type 24. And I'm going to calculate again. Okay. So go to the data tab. You can do this by yourself. Go to the data tab at the top and click solver. And then run it, solve again. Okay. Solve. Okay, now watch what happens. The optimal solution is no longer 24 and 8. It's changed to 0 and 8. It's changed to 0 and 8. Why? Because the coefficient was reduced below the sensitivity range. But now let's restore the original values. And let me go and now keep it within the sensitivity range. I'm going to keep it within the sensitivity range. It shouldn't go below 25. So I'm just going to put it at, say, I'm putting it at 26, just 26, just 26. It's still within the range, isn't it? It is. Let me run it. I'm expecting the value to not change. The value should still be 24 and 8. Let's run the analysis, click solve, okay, and then click solve again. Now watch, boom. The values are still 24 and then what? 8. The optimal solution has not changed. But of course, look at the Z value. The Z value has changed. but the optimal solution has not changed. The sensitivity range is very powerful. Now let's take the upper value. We said that keep this one still at 40 where it is, but this time increase it. He said it shouldn't go beyond 66.65. So let me even put it at the margin, 66. Okay, let me keep it at the margin, 66, and see what will happen. I'm not expecting the 24 and the 8 to change because it's within the sensitivity range. So the optimal solution should not change. Click solve, and boom, it has still not what? Changed. But let me move it to 67. Ooh, 67 is critical because it's decimal. Okay. 67. Let me move it to 67. It is just, not even by 1, it's just by like 30%. And let's see. I've never tried that before. Let's see. Okay. It's past it though. Okay. And then, oh wow, you see the optimal solution has changed just by exceeding it. So as long as the value, the essence of the sensitivity range is that as long as you are within the range, the optimal solution won't change. That's all. Okay, profit is going to change. As you can see, the Z value here has changed, but the optimal solution has not changed. Okay, who can tell me now the value of the sensitivity range for Fan Choco? Fan Choco. What is the range? What is the range for Fan Choco? Because I need to be sure that you are learning. Okay. By now, I'm expecting that those of you who are not talking, you have calculated all the sensitivity ranges, so all of them. You have calculated it. The sensitivity ranges. Calculate them. Who has gotten the sensitivity range for Choco? And then for those of you who are doing the others, tell me that of the others. Nanabenin, Choco. And then do for labor.
Yes.
Choco is what?
So for Choco, the LB is 30, and then the UB is 80.
Perfect. I agree with you. 30 and 80. Okay, that is good. Now, who has done for labor and who has done for milk? Sensitivity range for labor. Let me just show you the Excel. Sensitivity range for labor and then for milk. Who can tell me for labor? Who can tell me for milk? Okay. Guys, somebody is here. The person is not participating. Another is here. He's participating. The end will justify the means. Yes, Agnes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So for labor, the LB is 30 and the UB is 80.
Perfect. What about milk? Or you are not doing that?
For milk, LB is.
And yet do it. If you are not ready, don't worry. You don't need to rush.
And UB is 160.
All right. Okay. So you need to all know how to calculate the sensitivity ranges. It's very important. Learn how to master it, learn how to calculate it. But there's something little that I want you to note about that of the sensitivity range for the constraints. We said that as long as you are within the sensitivity range for the objective coefficient, the optimal solution will not change. That cannot be said for the constraint. For the constraint, even when you are within the sensitivity range, the optimal solution may change. Okay, so look at the example. It is 40 here. And you just told us that the gap is between 50 and 80. It's 50 and 80. So it means that if I go to 45, okay, if it was the objective coefficient, I'm expecting that it will still be, the optimal solution will not change. But for the constraint, the optimal solution will change. Everything will change. Even when it is within the sensitivity range. Even when it is. We said that it is between 50 and then what? And then 80. Now let me even make it 45. I have changed the labor to 45. Let's run it. And you see that the optimal solution is going to change. Okay, there you go. It has changed to 21 and 12, even though it is within the sensitivity range. So the sensitivity range, that is not changing the optimal solution. It's only for the coefficient. It's not for the constraint. It's for the coefficient. By how much do I need to raise labor up to? By how much do I need to raise labor up to? That is the upper bound of the sensitivity range. By how much do I need to lower labor hours up to? That is the lower bound of the sensitivity. So I just wanted to understand the power and the principles of this sensitivity. Once you master it, you are good to go. At this stage, I'm going to ask you all concluding questions. Concluding questions, and then that will be it for today. So first question. I think one of these questions, the answer was wrong. So I want to see whether you get it right. As long as any change is within the constraint, any change in the constraint is within the sensitivity limits, what happens? Who can tell me? As long as any changes in the constraint is within the sensitivity limit, what happens? Who can tell me the answer to this question? Who can tell me? Somebody who has been here with us should be able to tell me. Somebody who has not spoken today should tell me. Somebody who has not spoken today should tell me, and that person will not write my exams if he gets it correct. You see, that one is going to invoke demons in people to answer. If you get it wrong, no problem. If you get it right, you will not write my exams, and you have A by force. See, that will motivate. But you don't need an external reward to be able to ginger your internal power. Say fast. You don't need that. You not raise your hand. At this time, you are raising your hand. So I hope that you continue nicely like that, raising your hand by heart all the time. That is how it's supposed to be. In Nadole, you're supposed to have raised your hand the moment you started. But this is the first time you are raising your hand. So the hand must be raised all the time, not because there's a reward. Okay. Let me allow you to unmute yourself. Cephas, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. So for the constraints, we did indicate that looking at the shadow prices, a per unit increase in the constraint on the right-hand side has a corresponding increase in the profit by the shadow price margin that we see. But the limit to that increase is then what we have calculated here as the sensitivity range. So it means that if we're saying a per unit increase in the labor resource by 1, leaves a corresponding 16 factor increase in the profit. That increase is only allowable. That increase is only valid up to a maximum of 80 labor hours additional.
You have confused everybody for talking plenty.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, that's what happens when you talk plenty. You confuse the Joneses. I want somebody to make a simple answer to this question for us. Andrews, unmute yourself and talk.
Yeah, thank you, Doc. Thank you very much. So in such a situation, the objective solution remains the same, but the Z value changes.
Perfect. That's all. Okay. I deliberately put it a different way in the slides for people to go and say that, it will not affect blah, 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 just to see whether they will come and repeat that same thing. Anyway, my next question. Are there any wastages in this company? Are there any wastages in this company throughout this whole analysis? Are there any wastages? Who can tell me? Nadole. Now unmute yourself. Are there any wastages?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes. Are there any wastages? Yes, no.
No, please.
Okay, that's all I want. Okay. The no is enough for the rational ones to understand. Okay, are there any milk leftovers? Are there any milk left over? So you can answer that for me. Somebody is not talking. The person says, "I'm fine." Okay. Are there any milk leftovers? Dorinda, unmute yourself.
No.
Okay. Now, which is the most critical resource? Teresa, which is the most critical resource?
Yes, good afternoon. This is labor.
It's labor. Why?
Because when you increase labor with the shadow price, you get a higher profit than increasing milk.
Perfect. Excellent. Very good. Very good. Guys, you are good. You are good. You are the creme de la cremes of the whole world. That is why you are answering things by heart like that. At this stage, let me confuse you with the last of the Mohicans. Okay. This question is the deepest of all questions. Okay. So here is a story. Assume that fine yogurt was rather 0 instead of 24. The amount of sachet of fine yogurt I produced was rather 0 instead of 24. And the reduced cost when it was 0 was -5. Okay. Now, as you can see from here, the reduced cost was 0. And then the per unit profit is still remaining at 40. And then when you go to fine choco, it was 20 instead of the 8. And the reduced cost, which was previously 0, it still remains at the 0. But the profit is not 50 anymore, it is 90. By how much would the profit contribution of fine yogurt has to increase before it will be producible? That's a beautiful word. Before it will be producible, or before it will be profitable to produce it. By how much? How much would the profit contribution of fine yogurt has to be? In other words, what is the coefficient of profit has to be for me to force to produce it? How do you calculate that? Who can try this? Hallelujah. Should I give it to you as a homework? Who can try this? Or I should give it to you as a homework. Who is really ready? Or who is already thoroughly confused about the question? Okay, somebody says that I should give it to you as a homework. So I'm going to give it to you as a homework. I want you to go and battle it out. I want you to go and think about it, return, and come and tell me that, look, it was so easy. But you should note that the way to calculate it is to do something related to the sensitivity range, is to connect the coefficient with the sensitivity range. Use the reduced cost value, and then subtract it from the objective coefficient, and that will give you the answer. Or you should note that we are talking about the upper bound of the range at this stage. It's a very simple thing if you understand it. All right. There are assignments that I want to give you, and I want you to attempt all of these assignments. I will send you the assignments by a Word document. These are 4 different assignments that I want you to do it. You will do it in groups so that you can share and cross-fertilize ideas.